get things started.
Hello and welcome to Bounding into Comics. My name is John Trent. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief at Bounding into Comics. Today I got a story about Lord of the Rings and J.R.R. Tolkien, the author, making it crystal clear that Sam and Frodo are not homosexuals, despite cultural vandals on Twitter repeatedly attempting to try and claim that they are. So if you've been paying attention to social media over the past half-decade or even a decade, the attack on J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings is incessant. Cultural vandals attempt to repeat their lie ad nauseum that Samwise Gamgee and Frodo Baggins are homosexuals. It is indeed a lie, one that is easily disproved by actually reading The Lord of the Rings or even watching Peter Jackson's film adaptation. Nevertheless, these cultural vandals spew their vile poison in the hopes that if they repeat their lie often enough, people will eventually succumb and begin to believe it. The latest effort to spread these lies comes after Twitter user WargarW theorized that if Hollywood was making The Lord of the Rings today, Aragorn would have been a woman, but Arwen's still a she-elf, Frodo and Sam would have been gay, Gandalf black, and the only white male actors in the entire cast would have been Denethor, Grima, and Saruman. Hashtag wokeness. In response, the cultural vandals came out of the woodwork. One wrote Sam and Frodo would have been gay, would have in quotes. They then shared a SpongeBob meme asking, how do we tell him? Ironically, this response came after the user mocked WargarW by quoting Twitter user Toilet Gun, who wrote, Twitter is 90% someone imagining a guy tricking themselves into believing that guy exists and then getting mad about it. Clearly, that guy exists, as DreMeMo2 proceeded to reveal they are that guy. Twitter user Mads Brutal tweeted, everything else aside, imagine watching Lord of the Rings and not thinking Sam and Frodo are gay. Another tweeted, Sam and Frodo were gay when it came out in 2001, bro. You get the picture. These people have an agenda to push, and they will use every opportunity they get to push it. And it is my opinion they will continue to push it until their lie is accepted as truth. Fortunately, it will never be the truth. In the final chapter of The Return of the King, Tolkien writes, and so it was settled. Sam Gamgee married Rose Cotton in the spring of 1420, which was also famous for its weddings, and they came and lived at Bag End. Later in the chapter, Tolkien details, time went on and 1421 came in. Frodo was ill again in March, but with a great effort he concealed it, for Sam had other things to think about. The first of Sam and Rosie's children was born on the 25th of March, a date that Sam noted. In Appendix B of The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien would emphasize the birth of Elenor, writing, birth of Elenor the Fair, daughter of Samwise, on this day the Fourth Age began in the reckoning of Gondor. Later on in Appendix B, in a section titled Later Events Concerning the Members of the Fellowship of the Ring, Tolkien reveals that Goldilocks, daughter of Samwise, was born in 1431. He again makes it abundantly clear that Rose is his wife, writing, Master Samwise and his wife and Elenor ride to Gondor and stay there for a year. Tolkien also documents the death of Rose in 1482, writing, death of Mistress Rose, wife of Master Samwise, on Mid-Year's Day. On September 22, Master Samwise rides out from Bag End. He comes to the Tower Hills and is last seen by Elenor, to whom he gives the Red Book, afterwards kept by the Fairbairns. Among them, the tradition is handed down from Elenor that Samwise passed the towers and went to the Grey Havens and passed over sea, last of the ring-bearers. So clearly, the book makes it abundantly clear that they are not homosexuals and that Samwise Gamgee is married to Rose Cotton and they have at least 2 kids. Even if you haven't read the books and have only seen Peter Jackson's adaptation of them, it's abundantly clear that Sam and Frodo are not homosexuals in those films either. In The Fellowship of the Ring, at Bilbo's birthday celebration, Sam is clearly eyeing Rose as she dances and partakes in the festivities. And then at the end of The Return of the King, just like in the books, he gets married to her. And if you want even more evidence, Humphrey Carpenter detailed back in 1977 in J.R.R. Tolkien, a biography, that Samwise Gamgee was inspired by his fellow soldiers that he fought alongside in World War I. Carpenter quoted Tolkien saying, my Sam Gamgee is indeed a reflection of the English soldier, of the privates and Batmen I knew in the 1914 war, and recognized as so far superior to myself. Tolkien would echo these comments in a letter written to H. Cotton Minchin dated April 16, 1956. Tolkien ended that letter writing, my Samwise is indeed, as you note, largely a reflection of the English soldier, grafted on the village boys of early days, the memory of the privates and my Batmen that I knew in the 1914 war, and recognized as so far superior to myself. And if you want even more, Tolkien scholar John Garth describes the relationship between the 2 characters. The relationship between Frodo and Sam closely reflects the hierarchy of an officer and his servant in the First World War. Officers had a university education and a middle-class background. Working-class men stayed at the rank of private or, at best, sergeant. A social gulf divides the literate, leisured Frodo from his former gardener, now responsible for wake-up calls, cooking, and packing. British masculine reticence and class consciousness problematize the communications between Batman and officers, the odd couples of the battlefield. Tolkien maps the gradual breakdown of restraint through prolonged peril until Sam can take Frodo in his arms and call him Mr. Frodo, my dear. By then, the hierarchy is largely inverted. Frodo moves towards a childlike dependency. He presents the problems, Sam the solutions. In the First World War, this process was far from atypical. Officers were given commissions for class reasons, not because they were experienced soldiers or leaders, whereas the privates and Batman often had the age, experience, and wisdom their official superiors lacked. Garth goes on to cite C.S. Lewis's own personal experience. He says, C.S. Lewis, for example, had played Frodo to his Sergeant Sam. I came to pity and reverence the ordinary man, particularly dear Sergeant Ayres, Lewis recalled. I was a feudal officer. They gave commissions too easily then. A puppet moved about by him, and he turned this ridiculous and painful relation into something beautiful. Became to me almost like a father. With the help of Sam's homely chatter, Frodo even laughs on the edge of Mordor. Such a sound had not been heard in those places since Sauron came to Middle-earth, Tolkien notes. This is the kind of laughter that war correspondent Philip Gibbs, in Now It Can Be Told, believed acted as an escape from terror, a liberation of the soul by mental explosion from the prison walls of despair and brooding on the Western Front. So it's crystal clear that Sam and Frodo are not homosexuals, and if you try to project that onto them, you are either delusional or sinisterly pushing a disordered agenda. My name is John Trent, and you've been watching Bounding into Comics.
Ready? Go!